Hi, this is Ariana from the Fast Mode Studios. You have joined us today in our MWC 2022 interview series. Spirent is the leading provider of test and assurance solutions for next-generation devices and networks. They have recently released their 5G 2022 Market Drivers, Insights and Considerations report just ahead of MWC 2022. In today's episode, we are joined by Steve Douglas, Head of Market Strategy at Spirent, who will walk us through some of the highlights of the report. Steve will also share the company's participation at the recently concluded MWC 2022, including some very interesting showcases and speaker sessions. Hi Steve, happy to have you on today's session.
Hi Ariana, it's very good to be here today.
First off, how was this year's MWC 2022? What were some of Spirent's featured activities and showcases at the event?
Yes, to be honest, MWC 2022 this year was a very pleasant surprise. I think obviously with the cancellation a few years ago, last year not having the audience, it was really great to see so many people actually back at the event this year. And I thought what was quite nice about it as well was that rather than a very futuristic focus, which the show has had in the last number of years, this year's show was very much more grounded, sort of in reality. Where technologies like 5G really are, and what's sort of coming in the short term, and I think that felt very, very good. In regards to Spirent, we were very much focusing on really three key areas. One was on the sort of sustainability around 5G and the sort of green initiatives that the industry is doing at the moment. So we were speaking at the show about that, about how 5G, not only the technology itself can be more energy efficient, but also how it could also enable other industries to meet their sustainability targets. We were also discussing, again, on a talk at the show around security. Very much security around the role it's going to play as 5G starts to embrace the enterprise and the industrial ecosystems. What types of new security is going to be required, the standardization that's going to be required around that. And the last area was very much around collaboration. We had a number of demonstrations at this year's event, specifically with one of our partners, IBM, where we were demonstrating how operators and service providers could monetize 5G through network slicing. And we were helping the IBM, in that case, test how they could instantiate a network slice, validate its performance, test the security efficacy of it. So it was then ready to be utilized by big enterprises who were looking to utilize the public 5G networks for their future applications.
Great. So Spirent released its 5G 2022 Market Drivers, Insights and Considerations report recently. Can you share some of the highlights from the report and what are some of its key takeaways?
Yes, this is the third year we've been doing this report. Spirent's in a sort of a luxury position as probably the leader in 5G test and service assurance. We get pretty unique visibility right across the ecosystem. In terms of where the market's investing in terms of either future innovations or where they're investing right at this moment to get something commercially deployed or live or operational. So what we've been doing has been exposing some of the work that we're doing, just highlighting where the growth areas are in the markets. I think what was quite unique about the new report and sort of what we've seen over the last 12 months is probably three key areas there. One has just been the behind the scenes focus around the 5G core network and the move to standalone 5G. We saw a huge increase in our service provider customers and network equipment manufacturers really focusing in on trying to rapidly validate this new architecture for the 5G core, which is going to be multi-vendor. It's going to have to be hosted on the cloud. And that was raising quite a lot of new challenges for the industry. Not only is it a new technology and, this cloud skill set that's going to be required, but you're starting to see, because of softwareization, more and more releases coming from the vendors. You used to get maybe one or two major software releases a year in the old world. Now you're seeing sort of releases every few weeks. And that puts a pretty big overhead on operations and engineering teams. and that's sort of driving a desire for automation, more and more automation in the networks at the moment, especially around these pipeline processes. The second area that really sort of stood out last year, and we highlighted in the report, is around the cloud. Certainly, you've saw many of our service provider customers starting to engage and partner with the cloud service providers, the Amazons, the Microsofts, the Googles of the world, and also work with its specialist telco cloud providers, whether it's VMware or Red Hat. And there's this desire to utilize the cloud not only for hosting network functions, but also for bringing it out to the edges of the networks to offer differentiated services, whether that's for low latency services like maybe mobile gaming. And what's been quite interesting about this here is that we've been engaged with a number of leading service providers like Dish Networks in the US, like Rakuten in Japan, to really help them embrace the cloud as part of their architecture going forward. And I think that's a sort of a unique change that we've saw in the industry at the moment, especially when they can use the cloud environment as a collaboration environment to create a realistic environment where all of your vendors can rapidly validate their solutions to get them to market really quickly. And I think that's going to be a game changer we're going to see. And the last area, Ariana, which we talk about in the report is really around the live networks. Once the 5G networks have gone operational, we've seen a huge focus around how are we going to proactively monitor these networks to make sure that they deliver on the performance and the experience and the future SLAs. And I would say that what we saw during 2021 was this realization that the traditional ways we monitor networks probably weren't really good enough for this new dynamic architecture that we've got, this hybrid architecture, when some of the partnerships, some of your networks now hosted by a cloud provider. And a lot of the work that the service providers are focusing on now is really using active testing to test the networks continuously, even out in the live operational environments. In essence, you're injecting synthetic traffic into the networks to rapidly or proactively identify issues and faults before they actually impact any end user. And we're seeing that the desire to utilize technologies like that really sort of grow globally at the moment with major service providers as they start sort of not only deploying 5G, but partnering with these broader ecosystems like the cloud.
That's very interesting. So, like you said, this report is in its third installation. So, in these 3 years, how has the landscape of 5G changed, particularly the ecosystem of operators, technology vendors, cloud providers, application developers, etc.? Whose role do we see as most critical in enabling faster 5G deployments?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot of changes that have happened in the last 3 years. I mean, I still would be honest and say like 5G is still in its infancy. I mean, we estimate there's roughly probably about 200 commercial deployments of 5G today, but in many cases these are still very, very small. 4G is still the dominant sort of technology in most of the markets, and it will be for quite a number of years. But it certainly is accelerating faster. I would say we're probably, we're 3 times ahead of where maybe LTE 4G was after 3 or 4 years. And that's a real rapid sort of increase. What's quite exciting about it is we're starting to see new vendors and vendor diversity come into the market. So it's not just all of the traditional players that we've all been used to. Because of the cloudification and the softwareization of the networks, you're starting to see sort of IT players come into the mix like Dell. You're starting to see more and more players coming into the radio space with the evolution of the radio networks to something called Open RAN. So players like Mavenir, like Parallel Wireless coming into it. But also the cloud itself. As I mentioned, the big cloud providers are coming in, playing a pivotal role, and a lot of the specialist telco cloud providers, as I said, like VMware or Red Hat. And this diversity is creating sort of huge opportunity for the market at the moment to try to make the networks more agile, more dynamic, but also, unfortunately, it also creates more challenges because, again, the industry's been set up for dealing with a small set of suppliers where we've had to sort of help, validate that they all work together friendly. Now it's a pretty complex, diverse environment. And that's putting sort of new emphasis on things like interoperability as being sort of a big area of focus at the moment. I would say, your last part of the question, who's going to be the leader towards that? I would say it's probably going to be some of the cloud providers coming in. I think that's really going to help fast track many of the service providers, rather than having to build out their own infrastructure, their own capabilities around that. They can leverage the cloud and its ecosystem and actually benefit from that.
That's great. So, when it comes to testing, assurance, and the automation of 5G networks, what challenges do you see operators often grappling with?
Uh, yeah, this is a really interesting area because it's really twofold. One is really about the rapid transition out of a lab environment to a live commercial deployment. How quickly can they get their services or their networks live? And the other side of it then is very much around the ongoing management of the network once it is live. Because it's constantly changing, you have more and more maintenance activity, more and more changes happening. And what you're starting to see now is this desire to leverage automation and assurance right across that sort of life cycle. How can I get from the lab environments as rapid into the operational environments? And then how can I continuously monitor that environment and deal with all the ongoing changes? And we're seeing a huge focus here, especially when it comes around when you think about these lab environments, where you have lots and lots of these new vendors coming in. They all have to work together. They're all releasing software, all in different cadences. And this is where automation comes in to allow you to rapidly validate all of those combinations to make sure that they all work together, they're all secure, they're all safe for commercial deployment. Then you're taking the same capability and automating. How do I actually turn that up in an operational network? How do I get it to go live? And again, trying to reduce the human footprint as much as possible, the number of truck rolls that need to be done by automating a lot of those processes. And then when it is operationally live, not only do you want to monitor, actively test it, making sure is it performing correctly, are the SLAs being met, but you also want a mechanism to deal with if there are any changes going on that you can rapidly revalidate that those changes don't break anything, they don't degrade performance anywhere, they do what they're meant to do. And that's this new world of what I would call self-driving networks. And that's really where sort of the future of test and assurance and automation is enabling.
So, are today's testing, assurance, and automation tools ready to meet the needs of operators as they transition to 5G standalone networks?
I would say Spirents are. I think I think as an industry there are rapid changes. A lot of the traditional test and assurance is a very very silo type of activity and hardware, to be honest, activity. And because of the disruptions that have been happening, on the, in the with the 5G network, the cloudification as you move to standalone, the more and more software coming in, those sort of traditional tool sets are really not as relevant as they used to be. Silo testing, waterfall types of methodologies really don't deliver on the agility and the flexibility that I just talked about. So I would say a lot of tools and systems and solutions that are out there in the market today are probably still more old world, and that's something that that'll have to be rectified by a number of those types of suppliers. I think the new generation, the new world of test and assurance is really all about this capability to have sort of cloud native test tools that can be used across that life cycle, that can be automated, that can be spun up in the cloud in minutes to create that levels of agility. I also would say the other unique thing is probably the use of managed services or managed solutions. It's very clear when you engage with with a lot of customers today, the skill sets, the expertise isn't always there, especially when you've got this convergence of so many technologies having to come together at once. And they're looking for partners, neutral partners who can come in and bring their subject matter expertise, their skill sets. And I think this is where we're seeing also a change, is that rather than selling somebody a tool and letting them use it, it's more about coming in and helping them deliver an outcome, using the tools, using the subject expertise or subject matter expertise to enable that. And I think we're seeing more and more of that. And it's really about this collaboration and partnerships that we're seeing more and more today as the market evolves.
Excellent. So that was very insightful, and we definitely look forward to reading the report and following up on Spirent's initiatives in this space. Thank you, Steve.
Oh, thank you. It was very, very nice talking to you today.
Spirent's 5G 2022 Market Drivers, Insights and Considerations report is available for download at the link shared in this video. Apart from global and regional deployment trends for 5G, the report also assesses the role of cloud and the biggest opportunities fueling 5G adoption, deployment and growth. For more updates and coverage on MWC 2022, don't forget to visit www.thefastmode.com. Thank you and see you again. Bye!